passed by a judge is a decree from God. So.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm glad you agree.
Oh yeah, I remember. Here's what I was gonna say. I took a brief scan of his BitChute. Oh, are we live now? Oh yeah, well, I agreed with everything that I saw. No, so I took a brief scan of his BitChute, and it seemed like he thinks the Greys are the good guys. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's what it seemed like when with what I read. Well, I mean, neither am I.
I just think of Mr. Gray.
The Greys remain enigmatic figures with many different viewpoints on them. I'm just curious what Brian Rue's viewpoint is. I'm not sure if it's good or bad.
What is the Gray? That sounds like a creepypasta.
The Greys, the aliens, the big heads, black eyes, gray skin.
Yeah, it's the name of the stereotypical aliens that are like gray and big black eyes, and then you have like lizard people.
Short,
and then
they usually have psychic powers.
Yeah, but honestly, who cares about what somebody's opinion is for something that doesn't exist, right? I mean, like, what are we even talking about?
Things every atheist should say to every religious person.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, for something that doesn't exist, it still has a lot of relevancy to people. Like, a lot of people claim to make contact, and a lot of people have interesting ideas about what these things are.
Yeah, people would have ideas about what like sprites and fucking unicorns mean, right? Nobody.
Yeah,
really shit.
Both very real things that have very real phenomena.
A very real phenomenon.
And yet also 1/100th interesting of what they were or thought to be.
Yeah.
Unicorns are very interesting. Most people think they're just horses, but really that's only just their head.
At rhinos.
Oh, you really don't want to say that.
Well, Andy, how much impact do you think people who are like D&D fans who have like some sort of specific lore of their D&D, how does that impact society as well?
It's not about impact, it's about interesting information.
Yeah, but there could be interesting information in people playing D&D as opposed to people playing fucking.
Yeah, so we're in agreement.
Exactly.
His first name is literally Travis.
Yes. God.
Oh, what is his name?
You talking about Piers Morgan or something?
No, I know who you're thinking of.
Andrew Neil.
I know. Right at the tip of my tongue. Dinner.
Piers Morgan is a horse's ass.
Wow.
I don't understand how he went from being on CNN.
He's got good.
He went from being on CNN and like being I guess a liberal to like being just the most jackass fucking right winger possible on Good Morning Britain.
It's
Maybe they
called
just paid him
grifting,
more.
Zemo, and it's how you
Darren
stay
Brown.
alive.
I'm thinking of Darren Brown. Are you thinking of Darren Brown? That's what I'm thinking of.
Louis,
Oh.
yeah. God. Oh my God.
That gets
Well,
you
you
kind
see
of
people
close
talking to
while we're
aliens, and
starting
he's like central control.
Just well, like,
He's
I mean,
talking to Kortunk. There may be a problem having to do with weather.
well, Christians have been doing this shit for a long time, where they talk in like tongues and like all this kind of like crazy.
It's called glossolalia. It's a
Well, the
documented
thing about
phenomenon.
tongues
It
is it's
activates a
not
similar
supposed
part
to
of your
just.
brain as like different types of meditation.
It's
Yeah, so like
insanity.
your speech center isn't operating.
Yeah.
Like so your brain is like it's like a meditative type thing that they don't realize is actually just very simple, but they're like, it's the language of the angels. I used to fake
No,
speak in tongues. I went to a
no.
Pentecostal school.
Yeah.
Speaking in
Yeah.
tongues isn't even
I
supposed
went
to
to a
just be
Pentecostal.
gibberish. That's just like a modern
It's
idea.
supposed to be like a language and then somebody else interprets it.
Well, it's supposed to be like a miracle of you can suddenly speak a different language so you could
Yeah.
spread the word to
Well, it was
people. Like,
both of those things are like documented in the Bible.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying it happens, Travis. Jeez,
We're
calm
just
down, Mr.
talking about
Atheist. I'm saying in the Bible.
Bunch of hot garbage.
You
You're
sure?
welcome, Zemo.
Yeah. You sure? You sure you want to give me all the power?
Take it.
All right. All right. So I just hi, my name is Zemo.
Hi,
This
Zemo.
is Zemo's excellent shizo, and yeah, we're gonna talk about. Let me turn my camera. I I just wanted to talk about today the role of science in modernity in our modern world. Now, a lot of people would say, well, the role of science, I mean, we already have this laid out. It's a process, and as long as people are following this process, then we will get scientific results, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think that's exactly right. I think well, let me just read what I've uh, so the Chinese curse, which you may know, may you live in times of great change, right? So the proverb, the wit of the proverb comes from the fact that almost any time you're in that that is experienced by the subject will be a time of change or probably great change, knowing how humans have got along this far. So, with this being said, I'd like to discuss the role of science in the modern world. Um, well, what do I mean by this? You may ask. Well, like I said before, scientists is a system that gives us hypotheses that is based on data, facts, good guesses, and we have falsifiability, et cetera, et cetera. I think we have a pretty firm grasp on that, right? But as Jon Stewart said on the Colbert Report, when he dared point out the possibility that that the coronavirus could have possibly come from the Wuhan lab of virology, he pointed out that scientists don't know when to stop. Scientists just do science, right? A perfect example of this, right, would be the atom bomb. Okay, scientists were just trying to figure out how to create the best bomb, the best weapon. Now, some of the scientists during the Manhattan Project thought that by setting off this bomb, they could in turn set off the atmosphere, right? And could cause an inferno on the entire globe, right? They had no idea. They were just doing what scientists do, which is explore. And this opens up the door once again to possibly very dangerous things. I mean, we obviously see how many powerful things can be created by science. So yeah, and there's also another, I don't know if it's a paradox, but some food for thought is that science has given us this technology that we're enjoying right this second. We're enjoying Discord. We're able to communicate with people all across the globe. I think y'all know the basic idea, but at the root of this, at the same time, there are many that could argue that we're possibly much worse off because of the technology. Facebook, which is supposed to bring us together, has torn us further apart. So, Facebook, Twitter, you might want to say, well, hold on a minute. Do we need science to study the effects of this, and ethics to direct that science? So, yeah, I mean, basically, I'm concerned with some of these things. I mean, if automation takes over, what happens to all the displacement of jobs? I mean, how's that going to work out? Who knows? But it's coming, whether we like it or not. And will we get the answers from scientists? Probably not. But anyways, that's just a little opener. And yeah, and one more thing before I'll go around the room. I just want to ask maybe people's takes on the subject. I for one, I believe that, and then the big albatross that's going to, or elephant in the room for me at least, will be the question of morality and whether science can actually answer moral questions. Now, I believe it can. Now, I think it can by proxy. I don't necessarily believe it can directly. The ought and is and all this fun stuff. But nevertheless, I think you can actually do scientific experiments that are geared toward ethics and geared toward morality. So, for example, I'll just throw this out there. Jordan Peterson talks about this one a lot. He talks about if you get two rats together and they engage in wrestling, they engage in a display of dominance, a game, a bunch of different animals do it, including humans. It's probably one of the oldest human sports ever, actually, wrestling. So if you have a rat that's bigger than the other rat, if the one rat, they fight and they pin each other, right? So if one rat is bigger and can pin the other one 10 times out of 10, at a certain point, the other rat will not wrestle with the other rat. So, in other words, they detect the fact that it's not a level playing field or it's unfair. So what will happen is the bigger rat will actually let the smaller rat win about 25 to 30% of the time. And that's to keep playing, and so the other rat doesn't just get discouraged, et cetera, et cetera. And I think also, people have made rat cities and seen the exact same effects that gigantic populations have, where if you have a large sample of rats, there'll be a small sample of rats that get off and get real depressed, and they're basically like the junkies and the homeless people, and then you have another group of rats that are kind of the alphas, and they're having sex with most of the women, and all kinds of weird shit happens. And all of this can be directly tied to human behavior. Now, again, you can argue about whether the moral precepts come from science, and that's an argument to be had. But I think it's very clear that we can have scientific experiments with to expect moral answers within the data. One other thing, one other moral. I don't know where I heard this. I forget the name of the number, but basically they were talking about a society in which, if you just have everybody what's the maximum number of people that are total assholes until that society collapses? So what's the maximum capacity of jerks that will do anything to get over on anybody else. And there's actually a number before the society will collapse. It's like 20 to 25%. Once you have that many people, the society collapses, right? So this is another moral, ethical thing you can glean from science and mathematics and yada, yada, yada. But anyways, that's just a few foods for thought. And what? Should I go around the room or anybody? Yeah, I'll go around the room. How about that? So
I'd like to bring up your point in terms of one of the things you brought up, which I think is one of the most fundamental moral arguments in terms of the way we can moralize science in terms of the atomic bomb, right? So scientific advancement and the moral consequences of scientific advancements like the atomic bomb, and how the scientists and the creation of the atomic bomb took place. And I think there's kind of a misunderstanding that a lot of scientists are just philosophically inept, morally kind of obtuse, kind of not really thinking about these things. But I encourage anyone here that actually is curious about kind of the scientific implementation of the scientific moral impact of technological advancements like the atomic bomb to read Richard Rhodes' book, The Making of the Atomic Bomb, that actually has actually individual accounts of Robert Oppenheimer, of Richard Feynman, that worked on these projects and their experiences working on these projects and their moral misgivings, like, thoughts about, like, is what we're doing right or wrong. And this book actually talks about kind of we're at a scientific precipice, an engineering precipice, that we're able to develop a technology that has the potential to do something that we don't know what the consequences are. And these people are not philosophically inept. These are philosophical, like, in my opinion, Richard Oppenheimer, Richard Feynman, these are very astute philosophical individuals, and they took into account everything they did. And to think that there was a bunch of scientists or engineers that did this, that just were completely ignorant to the consequences, completely false. They're constantly battling the consequence. And to have hindsight,
I never said that.
is one thing, but for people at the time that were developing this technology where they didn't know where it would lead, uh, this was the balance. So I encourage anyone to read that book, because these people are
But
not like ignoramuses. They were philosophical. Like, they did
yes,
make these moral, like, interpretations. Why should we do this? Should we do this? If someone else accomplished this before us, what would be the consequences? It's a very difficult moral conundrum when we develop technologies.
yeah, but when they're also like to your point, Underjoy, there also has to be a differentiation between the scientific understanding of certain facts between the political use of those facts, or the like the way like the greater society or the people in charge are going to use the information, right? So yeah, of course, fucking um Feynman and Oppenheimer like understood like the impacts of their achievements, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that their achievements, what they sought to understand and what they learned, was necessarily wrong, or there was nothing inherently bad about their uh, understanding or their creation of this technology. What's bad is how that technology was used, right? So that is something that has to be recognized as well. Like, I don't think there's anything necessarily bad about scientific understanding. So say somebody like figures out like the way the smallpox works, and they can create a vaccine for smallpox where it's never going to be an issue, but they could also create a weapon where they can give people smallpox as part of like a way, like the government can like take what they learned and like figure out a way to like give another population smallpox to win a war, right? like that doesn't necessarily mean because though these certain scientists figured out here's how the way smallpox works, what they are doing is bad. Like the only thing you can say is like, well, okay, when people understood, like when once these guys figured out the way it works and the way people took that understanding and they use that understanding in a bad way, that's different than.
But to say that the scientists don't take into consideration, I think, in my opinion, is
Oh
false.
no,
I
no,
think a lot, right? I think
no,
a
But
lot of
no.
the
nobody
things,
said that though. Nobody said that though, Overjoyed.
Yeah.
no, but right, but I think any technological advancement, I think like to say that it's morally neutral in terms of the advancement of technology, I agree with you 100%. But to say that the scientists that are involved in that development don't actually take that into consideration, I think it's a bit of a fallacy because I think
Yeah, I didn't say
everyone
that.
that's involved in that, so right, but I mean that's the point, that everyone that develops a new technology, to say that they're emotionally kind of like neutral towards the development, I think it's false. I think most people that advance technology have moral and political views in terms of how that technology is going to affect society. Jerome Lanier right now is talking about how social media and the internet and all this shit is, and even virtual reality is going to influence human evolution. Like uh,
Yeah.
in terms of like young people being influenced by social media and all this stuff, and the people that developed the internet, like were at the precipice of developing social media, are warning us right now about the negative influences of social media. So this is kind of a thing. Even uh, Richard Feynman was in a depressive state after the Manhattan Project, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Richard Feynman was like completely depressed over what, even though he understood what happened, like the fact that that did occur, like he was completely devastated.
I
I
I
could,
I, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Mhm. Yeah, Robert
if
Oppenheimer quoting the
Yeah.
Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
if I could step in, I feel like this is more of a philosophy chat because it to the question that's posed is the role of science is pretty clear to me that science by definition describes the physical world. Okay? And if it does
But
that, what that
scientists are
basically means is
philosophical.
that, hold on, what that basically means is that it just reports data. What we do with that data and how we use that data from there derives the human philosophical mind because that's where the ideas, what to do with this data come from. And until you remove the human being, then it won't be in philosophy. But until then, it's just a tool to gather data because it turns out we're just extremely bad at guessing our reality. We literally are bad at it. Okay, we used to throw people in volcanoes for God's sake to make them shut up.
Well,
So
even just take the discovery or the understanding of being able to make gunpowder, right? Like that was something that was a science.
literally moved mountains.
Yeah, yeah, it was a scientific discovery.
Right. Every business
And then
plan and idea
people
on how to
used it
use
in a
it
bad
after
way,
that was
right?
all philosophy. That was all philosophy
Yeah.
after that. That was all morals and values and judgments and things like that. So science role is to do that. Now, where I find an issue, especially in modern times, the data is being manipulated, used against other people in other ways, and it starts from ground level all the way up to, somebody selling you something and the wording is just right and scientifically speaking it's just right, but there's issues or problems and things like this. So
Well,
science
that's
scientists and scientific companies and science itself and that whole system should never be scrutinized. I think it's an amazing tool if we find something better to describe our physical reality. We are all better off here because of it, and humanity has literally broken more barriers than I don't even count. We're waiting for the Great Barrier, but I think we passed quite a bit just with this tool called science.
Yeah, let me jump in here, and I don't want to give anybody the impression that I am questioning science itself, but I just want to throw this out there, and then I want to go around the room. we live in what I consider at the moment is the Chinese curse. May you live in times of great change. We live in a time of like an authority crisis of what institutions can you go to and trust to give you information, correct information. Dr. Fauci, a perfect example. Many people believe, and I think there's substantial evidence to point to the fact that not only did he know about the Wuhan lab, but he was the big funding guy for the lab.
Seymour,
Hold on, I'm not finished.
How do you, real quick,
Hold
Seymour,
on, I'm not finished.
real quick. How do you interpret that Chinese saying, like, may you live in interesting times? Like, in your opinion, what does that mean?
Well, the wit of the saying comes from the fact that all times, it may you live in in times of great change. Did I say interesting?
Yep, did that.
Yeah. May you live in times of great change. And what I'm pointing out is we're in 2022. We're in times of great change, and a lot of that is due to what? Science. So, and we're in a situation where the whole world has been locked down because of and I mean, you know, you could people get torn on this point, but it's very possible that all of this is from scientists with the best of intentions, with all the belief in the world that gain of function research will actually help us combat stuff into the future. This is why I brought up the Jon Stewart quote.
But is
And I
that
think it's
wrong?
important. And I think it's important because scientists, by and large, now of course when you're working on the atomic bomb, you would be a robot not to think of the ethical implications. I mean, that is just obvious. But to think that scientists that work in the CDC every single day are thinking every step of the way, is this ethically sound? If you're thinking that Fauci, when he's approving giant grants for funding of different things, and he, they have scientific tests with dogs in cages, et cetera, and they can be actually scientific, like the things that Nazis did in the concentration camp technically were scientific. Now, the moral underpinnings of that, they were unscrupulous at best, but the point still stands that I think you're not giving enough credit to the point that scientists, by and large, just do. They just discover that.
But do you think gain of function research is immoral?
I mean, if you are taking viruses and souping them up, I don't know much about the benefits of it. It sounds like
it's attempting to predict future. It's attempting to predict future viruses. Okay, so it's attempting to predict future viruses so we can combat that, right? So we're trying to do something that, like, here's some potential viruses that are going to affect us in the future. How are we able to combat that? So gain of function is trying to understand how viruses mutate and evolve. So in the future, we're able to respond that in a very efficient manner because we don't want our entire species to die off because that's possible.
And if a worldwide,
we're trying to head off at the pass certain problems. So that's gain of function.
And if a worldwide pandemic happens because of that, that's just a byproduct of the science.
That's a byproduct. That's a byproduct of people not doing their job, or if that is the lab, it was cited for issues consistently, right? For leakage, right? Specifically for leakage. So it is up to people to do this. But if it wasn't us for understanding the atomic bomb, and I get it, that also brought us nuclear energy and nuclear understanding, which led to far more superior gains. The nuclear bomb was unfortunately humanity's yang or dark side that is also being used. We do this with every piece of technology.
Sure. I mean, I didn't want it to make a debate between me and other people, but all right, let's go around the room. Andy, you go first. Hit us with it. What do you think? Or you don't even. What's the number one thing that pops into your mind right now when you think of science in the modern world and and what we should be careful about, or what we should look forward to. What do you got?
I think we definitely shouldn't look at another human being as a moral authority simply on the grounds that they're a scientist. Because being scientific doesn't mean moral.
Correct.
And you can't exactly scientifically prove what is good or bad, but
All right.
Science is kind of a somewhat neutral force, I guess.
Yeah. Lebowski, you done, Andy? Or you got any more?
Yeah, no, that's probably as much as I got right now.
I was hoping
right,
Andy
cool.
would say something funnier.
All right, Lebowski. What you got, Lebowski? I know you got something. All right, going once, going twice. All right, Dow, hit us with it. What's your number?
Science is like the spell book. So like we're if you think of society as a wizard, and we're trying to learn magic, the only way we can learn magic is to like map it out and write stuff down. So that's what science is. It's us making a map of predictions so that we can predict the outcome of events. So we name specific things, give them qualities, and say that this is how they interact, and then now we basically have a map of what's going on. But the point of science is to be able to reliably predict the outcome of events, so that we can avoid certain things or make certain things happen, like computers or bows and arrows, whatever the thing is.
So what's your biggest positive that you see going forward? The number one scientific positive that you see going forward, and what's the number one scientific concern you see going forward?
Well, the number one positive is that it's literally freaking magic. Come on, like we can do whatever, we can figure out what we can do and then do or not do that. So it's kind of the key to having a good life. Negative, in my opinion, is that it's often taken to be like actual, and I don't think, especially parts of science, but I think there's like you can't. I think most people think of science as like an explanation for what reality is, and I think it's a lot more like it's the way we can do magic. We can figure out how to make stuff work. It might not map onto reality exactly, and it might, and it's kind of hard to tell. Those would be my two.
All right. I don't want people. Okay, I'm gonna do this, then I'm gonna go to Fateh. I don't want people to get too caught up in the title. I just said that I'm not like necessarily questioning science or anything like this. I'm talking about more of the problems that we're gonna face vis-a-vis like automation taking over tons of jobs. The possibility of science actually, being our downfall. I mean, there's the great filter with, the cosmos and, great civilizations. If they don't destroy themselves first, and what are they going to destroy themselves with, right? Probably some scientific invention, right? It's not really. I don't really want to be it too much about the role of science in modern world, because I think that's pretty well established, right? But anyways. I just wanted to say that. What you got, Fateh? Fatih? What?
Well, I would call science a tool of understanding And it does not really give to you any obvious moral guidance. I think that science is just one of the tools that man has invented toward our own benefit.
Right.
And
So what's one of the big things you're looking forward to? And what's the one scientific wise? What's one of the big things that you fear?
you know, it is possible that a rogue artificial intelligence could do serious harm to humanity. But really, I would be more worried about, what some person could do with any sufficiently advanced technology.
The wrong person, you're saying?
Yeah, what any person could do,
Quote unquote the
really.
wrong person.
Yeah.
All right. And you're saying anybody could do it, so a good person could do it by accident, right?
A good person could do it for any number of reasons, an accident, or maybe they were misled, or the truth of what their actions was obfuscated from them.
All right. Sounds good. What about you, Mace? What you got? What do you think is the role of science today? You see any problems with where it's headed? Anything like this? Not
Yeah.
necessarily where science is headed, but where civilization is heading and its connection with science.
I love science. It's much better than blind faith in every way. There's literally no disadvantages to it.
Okay. There's no disadvantages to there's no disadvantages to it, you think?
Yeah, the only alternative is blind faith.
No, I'm not talking about alternatives. I'm talking about any negative consequences that might come along with a better scientific like for example technology that could destroy the human race, right?
Um,
Is that not possible through science or what?
how? What kind of? I don't know. Could you give me an example?
Like a
I
like a
can't really think
pandemic,
of.
like a pandemic, like an atomic bomb,
Well,
like
you already said earlier that's nothing to do with science. That's to do with
why not?
morons.
Why not? But no,
Well,
but
that's to do with
technology is
human
scientific.
beings being stupid or evil.
Yeah, but human beings being stupid or evil is a lot more devastating when they have powerful scientific inventions. Correct?
Um, I don't know. I mean, historically speaking, I think many more people have died due to religion than due to science.
Sure. I mean, I grant you that just because religion's been around a lot longer than science. There's been a lot more people to kill, but
I disagree
so
there.
so
Even the invention of fire is science, isn't it?
um I don't know. I don't know, mate. I don't think so. I think it was just.
You don't
I
think
think.
discovering
I think.
fire counts as science?
No, I mean the same way as like a lightning bolt isn't science. Now discovering what it is science. Is science can be scientific, right? But fire in and of itself, I don't think is science.
discovering a new tool and then figuring out how to use it, surely that's science.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't even know if science
Okay,
wasn't even
then.
invented back then, right?
How about naming new species? Does that count?
Naming new species. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay,
I was,
so
I was
science has been done for possibly even longer than religion then, because like even before religions were around, we would have had to identify new species that enter our environment and figure out what species of plants are safe to eat and stuff like that.
sure. Sure, if you want to call that science. So, I just want to challenge you one more time. You said there's probably no downsides, if no downsides at all. What's the difference between blind faith in like religion and then blind faith that there's no downsides to science? Isn't that a sort of faith?
I'd say the downside is blind faith is A, false, and B, manipulative. It can be used as a tool to make even an intelligent and good-willed person do stupid and evil things. Science cannot be used for that purpose.
So I'm just going to challenge you, and then I'm going to move on to the next person. But if I tomorrow created a computer chip that I can insert in your brain, and like the man and the brain in the vat, the evil man who controls your brain in a vat, or a microchip, and then I had you go out and kill your family, that wouldn't be science being used for an immoral purpose?
The invention of the chip would be science. The use of the chip is not science.
All right, fair enough. I disagree, but anyways. All right, Grim, what do you got? What's your biggest concern with the way with our increasingly technological world? You see any not downside, but things we should look out for?
Yeah,
When it comes
there's
to
a
this partial progress.
there's a disturbing Venn diagram. If people don't know what Venn diagrams are, they're just two circles overlapped on each other. And in the left circle, you have the advancement in technology, and on the right, you have the amount of psychopaths that are in the world that can use that technology. And as we noticed, as technology gains, the amount of destructiveness coming from psychopaths also increases. So we do not want psychopaths to have a nuclear warhead, for instance. It can do more than a psychopath with a gun. So this is becoming an increasingly big issue, and fortunately we've been able to get ahead of it, but at great resource and at great cost.
Yep. All right, cool. What's something that you look forward into the future and say I can't wait till that happens. Science has promised us, whatever, and I can't wait till it's here.
Sure. A lot of people don't understand the new science, which is quantum science, right? Which is understanding the quantum field. But more
Right.
importantly, what we're discovering. Right? We say quantum field because it's just a different realm upon which standard models don't work. And we've gotten really, really good at it and increasingly good at it every 10 years. So much so that we're noticing that some of the things that we can create, like endless energy or wormholes, things like this, perpetual motion machines, almost pretty much perpetual motion machines, because our understanding of energy has completely changed on the quantum scale. Now we can start manipulating space-time fabric using quantum, right? What do you think we're doing to space-time? We're manipulating it already right now. People do it every day with all the technology that we have around us. We like to move electrons in certain areas, and we like to kind of mess with certain type of I would say electromagnetic or strong weak nuclear forces things like that. We're already manipulating these things. So now that we start doing it on a quantum level, our complete understanding of what we can really, really do as a species takes us, I think, farther beyond any other great barrier that would pose a threat, except for the fact of us using it on ourselves.
All right. Anyone else? Jimmy. What's up, Jimmy? Oh, we got Discard
Hey,
in the chat too. What's up, Jimmy? So yeah. So what's some things that in the realm of science, and this isn't just about science. It's science in the world that we live in today, right? Which is increasingly more difficult to find the right path, find an institution you can trust, find a source that you think is reliable, et cetera, right? So, um, and in that, science gets kind of, unfortunately muddled in politics and all this type of stuff. So, what do you think are some things we should keep an eye on scientifically pertaining to science that could be negative for, like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of that?
um, I think the first thing that comes to my mind would be the use of something like a virus that would be used to put fear in the population.
Right.
And that's maybe I don't want to say conspiracy mind in me, but I do think those in power want more power.
Right.
And as we get better at manipulating diseases, I do think they will take advantage of that.
Right.
And then as far as just normal people go, the thing I'm most concerned about probably is the rise in depression rates and mental health in general.
And do you think that
things like social
connects?
media are causing.
Right. And you think that connects directly to the technology that we've developed?
Yeah, I just think it's something that human beings weren't ready for.
Right.
Well, I think Simo, you asked an interesting question. Like, we have all this science and data, and how we're able to like figure out what is, what should we take seriously, what should we not. And I think one thing a lot of people don't understand, and thing, part of the philosophy of science is understanding why the scientific consensus is valuable, right? Like, there's a scientific method, but in terms of what we should take seriously, I think the best method we have right now is accepting the scientific consensus, and that is about as apolitical and as non-biased as possible, because it takes the scientific community as a whole, from different political regions, different religions, different cultures. You have scientists from the United States, from China, from Russia. If everyone that's a scientist, that's an expert in the field, from different cultures with different interests, different biases, agree all on one thing,
Right.
it's the best method we have. And if you're saying, well, that can still be faulty. Well, sure, but if you're saying that can be faulty, you should say, well, what could be a better method? In my opinion, there's no better method than to accept the scientific consensus. That is the best method we have. And if you're able to say there's a better method, please tell me what a better method would be than accepting the scientific consensus.
Right. Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, the scientific consent, I mean, science does not work on consensus, right? But that being said, um, especially with things that have been studied over a long period of time, the scientific consensus can be a very, very reliable way to understand. I mean, the poster boy for this is global warming, right? Like you said, you have a huge sample size of scientists that all agree on different things, even though they're different countries, different politics, different motives, different geopolitical apparatuses at play. but yet they all agree that these gases are trapping fucking sunlight, however it works, and yeah, we got a heating up planet, and the icebergs are melting, and all this fun stuff, right? Which that's another thing I didn't even think of, but global warming. I mean, again, I go back to this Jon Stewart. I mean, he just kind of said it on Colbert. It's kind of a throwaway line, but he said scientists just do. Scientists, and you don't even know what you don't
Well,
even
that,
know what the effects would
even
be.
right. So,
But
so
hold on,
okay.
but hold on. Let me finish. But like, you don't even know what the effects are. Like, when they were creating the internal combustion engine back in the 1800s or whatever, nobody would have ever dreamed that it would create a greenhouse effect and possibly raise the sea levels and all this. And science can help us avoid disaster with that too, right? But yeah.
One of the big things that really just like fucking like I hate like it's a big pet peeve with me because I have family members that keep bringing up shit like big pharma and the bias is because everyone's motivated by money and big pharma is like influencing everything. And like my argument against that is that why the fuck would a Chinese scientist or Russian scientist give a shit about the profit motive of Pfizer or Moderna or United States companies? So big pharma is a very US centric conspiracy theory. Everyone in the United States has a conspiracy against big pharma because the opioid crisis, doctors prescribing opioid drugs, but this because they get kickbacks. This doesn't happen in other countries. In countries with socialized medicine, there's no profit motive. Like doctors don't get kickbacks from big pharma to prescribe certain medications. uh, uh, medical doctors and scientists in China and Russia have no motivation to agree with the scientific consensus that validates drugs from big pharma because they get no benefit from it. It would actually be opposite. They would say, I deny that. They would
What do
like
you mean by
like
big
fight
pharma?
like so when you have a scientific consensus where people that are have different biases all agree on a single thing, in my opinion, you should take that seriously. Like
Is
when
Pfizer big
people say
pharma?
that certain drugs are beneficial, it's not just a profit motive. Sometimes a certain drug is a good thing.
I agree. Big pharma just refers to the pharmaceutical industry, especially normally in the United
It's a
States.
uniquely
Like
United States conspiracy. It
it's
doesn't
like big
apply to
oil
anywhere
with
else
big.
in the world.
Yeah,
It makes no
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Well, I think to be fair, I think the rates that people take medication in the United States is like ridiculously higher than um, anywhere else in the
That's
world,
true.
right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's why the conspiracy theory is the thing because, like, there's certain facts about overprescription of medication and a problem with the American medical system that is entirely, completely true. But
yeah,
to say that this validates that, like a lot of scientific studies are false or certain drugs are bad, like when other countries accept them as actually valid treatment methods, when there's absolutely no bias or profit motive involved, then that's not that valid because unfortunately sometimes there's a profit motive to create certain drugs, but sometimes those drugs actually work.
Like, I guess I
yeah.
would just ask you, Underjoyed. I don't want to go off topic, ZMO.
No,
If
it's
you just
fine.
look
I'll
at the
bring.
numbers, though, the reason why it's talked about so much is because big pharma makes the majority of their money here in the United States. If you look at the pharmaceutical numbers,
No, no, I agree. But when a Chinese psychiatrist prescribes um, lorazepam for a patient that's undergoing psychosis or has schizophrenia in China, and they get no kickbacks or money from that, they're doing it, in my opinion, because they are qualified medical professionals. China has their own, kind of scientific studies, and they determined that this drug is very beneficial to prescribe to someone suffering from this illness. And in the United States, there's a terrible profit motive involved that makes certain drugs overprescribed, and there is a terrible aspect to big pharma, but that doesn't invalidate the science around pharmaceutical, medication, because it does eventually get verified by other countries that are completely unbiased towards American big pharma. Like they're, no one in China or Russia wants American companies to get bigger or more profitable. They don't give a shit about that. So the fact that they prescribe these drugs tells us that maybe they do work.
So is Pfizer a big pharma?
Yeah, of course.
So why doesn't
Moderna.
Pfizer benefit, in your opinion, from the
They do,
virus?
but just because they benefit doesn't mean it's like they're not producing decent, good drugs that are treating certain
Yeah,
illnesses.
it sounded like he was saying Pfizer only benefits in America.
No, but the conspiracy theory that like there's some sort of like the only reason why doctors prescribe certain drugs or whatever is because they're getting kickbacks and these drugs actually don't work and there's better treatment methods that could be involved, and it's a giant conspiracy theory. All these drugs are bullshit. No, that's bullshit.
Yeah, well, I do want to say that, I mean, me personally, I think the opioid crisis in America is, and I don't use this term lightly, the crime of the century. I mean, I think it is a crime that has been perpetrated on the American people.
I
Now,
agree. I agree.
this is neither here nor there. Well, it is a little bit actually. Yeah, I think it's a crime that's been perpetrated on the American people. The doctors knew. The people who gave it to the doctors knew. They told. Okay, with OxyContin, for example, it's with the old OxyContin, they were time released. So if you took a 40 milligram OxyContin, the doctors told the people who designed it, or the pharmaceutical executives or whatever, went to the doctors and told the doctors, hey, this is time released, therefore it's not addictive, right? Which is just total bullshit. Total bullshit. And honestly, any doctor should know that if you give a patient opioids, it's addictive. It doesn't fucking matter if it's time release or not. But yeah, I mean, they've earned a bad reputation for a good reason, but I still, with that, all that being said, I still agree for the most part. The pharma, I mean, if you look at all the good that pharmaceuticals have done compared to the negative, I want to live in a world with them opposed to without them.
Opioids are really
Yeah,
difficult because sometimes you can have chronic pain, chronic
a-
conditions where
absolutely.
you can say that potentially being addicted to an opioid prescription is actually less suffering than just not prescribing that opioid. So sometimes doctors make a difficult kind of utilitarian analysis where they're saying, well, obviously opioids are good, opioids are addictive, but I will give you that prescription because your suffering far outweighs the consequences of being addicted to the opioid. Now, the problem with the United States, like you have like non-universal health care, you don't have drug plans, so people get addicted to opioids, lose their jobs, become drug addicts, become homeless, become criminals just because the only way to get their opioids is to commit crime. Like that entire synthesis is unique to the United States. In certain countries, that's not things. In certain countries, you can have, sustain drug plans because opioids aren't the only thing you need to take for life in some certain circumstances. Certain psychiatric drugs you might need to take for life. Certain people that suffer from certain psychiatric illnesses like schizophrenia might need to take a antipsychotic for life. Now, if the if you live in a country where the only way you can afford that drug is if you can pay for it, you might be in a circumstance where you cannot pay for it and eventually become psychotic, eventually become, like ill because you can't afford to take that drug anymore. that is a problem, but that's a problem of the system, not a problem of the drug. Sometimes taking that drug and accepting the consequence of the drug is far more moral than to accept that disease.
Yeah, it's all based around incentives, right? So if the negative incentives are there, it, and people make room for people to operate with immunity, more or less, they're gonna sell their dope and get on down the road. In 20 years, it won't be prosecutable, or however the hell it works. Um, so I guess. All right. Well, this is going to bring me to another part of my little show here, and I guess it's a natural segue into the troubling rise in anti-scientific thought, especially in the United States, but it's happening in other places around the world as well. I mean, we have many people that are denying that the vaccines will work, or that they're actually more harmful than getting COVID, and I've heard this word scientism lately, and it's kind of I've been kind of tied in with Democrats and policies in California, lockdown policies, et cetera, et cetera, and I mean, I think it's anybody could see where science intersects with politics. That is a recipe for fucking disaster, right? Especially politics as crazy as it is in the United States. But yeah, I mean, there's just a growing amount of people, whether we like it or not, that even if they're not thinking about scientific things like medicine, technology, they're not thinking anywhere on the scientific spectrum. Like if it comes to QAnon or maybe denials about certain politicians and how effective and well they work. Like it's the chronicle of crazy in the United States. So, what are y'all's thoughts about um, the anti-vax movement, this sort of anti-scientific movement, the skepticism of scientists, skepticism of the quote-unquote the elites, uh, and this really is kind of where this talk came from. I don't want I don't want to give anybody the impression that I'm anti-science or anything like this. I think it is the best tool we have, but at the same time, if it's the best tool we have, it's also the best tool we have to fuck with each other, right? So that's just where I'm coming from. So what do y'all think we can do about the rise in sort of anti-scientific, anti-skeptical, to use Pangburn's word, these sort of movements in the United States and around the world,
The most
anti-intellectual movements, etc.
the scariest thing about these beliefs is that they're becoming political. They're not just you know uh, beliefs that people have, like certain conspiracy theories, certain beliefs, but they're becoming politically motivated, where people are having real world effects, right? So
They're
so
becoming political.
yeah.
They're becoming political religions, right?
Right, and their beliefs are starting to impact real world, like have real world consequences. Because you could say in the past, well, it doesn't matter what you believe. Like, people have a lot of different beliefs. Certain people believe in Thor, they're Wiccans, they're, yes, Christians, Muslim, whatever, but not everyone's beliefs necessarily impact their judgment on a day-to-day basis, right? Like they have certain beliefs, but when they take the bus, fly, plane, if they're going to crash, they're not going to pray to Jesus, pray to Allah, or like pray to Thor. Like they're going to pull down their oxygen masks and hope the pilot can land the plane. But right now, we have a problem where those beliefs are starting to impact our real world, right? So people's politics and actions, like we have people that are being voted, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like all these people that are QAnoners that have delusional beliefs that are right now in politics affecting our day-to-day lives. They have votes and able to affect our day-to-day lives, which really concerns me. And what doesn't it doesn't concern me if you're it doesn't concern me if you're a conservative or a Democrat or if you're left or right. But it concerns me when your interpretation of reality is completely delusional. Like that's the problem. It's not the like we can disagree on policy, but when we disagree on reality, that's scary. That scares
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before in the past, like in 2000, we would disagree. We would have the facts, and we would just disagree about what they mean. We would draw different conclusions off the facts. Nowadays, we're we have clans, tribes that operate with different facts, right? And in my opinion, this is just 101 of how to destroy a society. An idiot's guide to end of civilization, right?
when we can agree on facts, I think I can have a rational discussion and come to an agreement with someone that has a different view from me. But when we disagree on facts, it just I don't know how to bridge that gap. When we like when I think the Earth is a sphere and you think the Earth is flat, I don't know how I can bring you back because it's not like science is not the problem. No flat earther is just lacking scientific evidence. The brain, like the way the brain interprets reality at that point is so different than the way my brain interprets reality that just facts about science and reality can no longer bridge that gap. They're no longer an interesting or a motivative influence I can have upon someone that disagrees with me.
Right.
I think the rise of the use of social media has contributed to what you might be complaining about, ZMO, because with more and more
Start.
things out there, people are getting a whole bunch of information, and let's say it would be more than say more information than say Americans received in the 50s. It was very limited what they got their information from, so they kind of trusted it was from a small group, whereas now there's so much out there, Facebook, a whole bunch of websites, and people just receive lots of information, and they can indulge in the whole flat earth and the whole conspiracy that the vaccines is a form of population control because there's so much data out there and people pushing out an agenda. And I think
Yeah.
that might have contributed to it as well.
Yeah. And even if the consensus is 99% of that whatever, pick your topic, you'll always be able to find a 1% of some rogue scientist or whatever that have a different opinion. I mean, it's like in court cases where they have a it's like obvious the guy killed his wife, and they have a test. They have a guy to testify on the bullet analysis, and then they have another expert that comes in and testifies the exact opposite, right? So which one's right? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I know
And
PhDs
it's
in astrophysics. Yeah, I know that one PhD in astrophysics that believes the Earth is 6,000 years old, needs the young Earth creationists. Like,
yeah.
you can be an expert in a field and have a fucking completely out there belief, but that's why we don't appeal to experts, right? We appeal to consensus, which is different than single experts because people can be very intelligent, very qualified, and have completely false beliefs because everyone can be wrong. You know, that's one of our best understanding of how the human brain works. We can all be wrong.
Yeah, and science intentionally. I mean, we know we can be wrong. We actually will put in a lot of effort to be wrong. If we think we're right and we want to prove someone else wrong, we will search for our evidence high and low until we can find it. Right? If I believe that global warming is just something that Democrats made up or China, I can find that study. I can find that group of people that don't believe in it, and we can have our conferences, and we'll live our lives believing it, and like you said, it's bleeding into reality. But yeah, it's the intersection of socio-political and scientific truths is a and then you throw in technology in there and it becomes muddled.
I do think in some ways the left weaponizes science in a way that it uses as a cudgel to actually make a claim that like people on the right have a moral failing, like they're ignorant, they're bad, they're terrible people. And I think that in some way that causes people on the right to have a reactionary understanding of how science works. And I think this kind of this kind of like failure of presenting how science works to everyone and politicizing science and you know using it in that way as a cudgel, I think is bad. I think it has been a failure of how people have presented, you know, how science works, scientific facts. Science
Well,
communication does not need to be partisan. It needs to appeal to everyone, in my opinion.
no. Anybody have anything they want to say? I don't want anybody to hog the mic or anything. Share the love. Lebowski, what do you think of the politicization of science nowadays? Huh? I don't think Lebowski's been in the room for a minute. Jimmy Fate, Andy, what we got?
I got a question. Has anybody brought up Nick Bostrom's technology urn analogy yet?
No, please bring it out for us.
So, if you imagine this urn that is inside, there are these balls, and each ball represents some piece of technology that humankind has invented. And we're constantly reaching into this urn and pulling out new balls as we discover new technologies, right? And so far, so good. Arguably, all of the technologies we've developed have been more or less for the good of humanity. But he postulates that there's a possibility that inside the urn is a black ball, the discovery of which means in some way the destruction of mankind or the destruction of civilization as we know it. The example he gives is the Manhattan Project, where they did these calculations because they didn't know what was going to happen when they set off the nuke. They're like, well, maybe we're going to set the atmosphere on fire. Like, let's do some math and find out. And there wasn't a consensus on that, and they went ahead anyway. So that's one example. Another example would be, as it happens, making a nuclear explosion is incredibly difficult and expensive. But what if setting off a nuke was as easy as microwaving sand or something like that?
Isn't that his answer to the Fermi paradox, the great filter that eventually technology outpaces morality and societal like consciousness? So any society that evolves will eventually develop technology to the point where they can eradicate themselves far easier than they can help themselves. So all it takes is for one lunatic to have
Yes, that's what I was saying.
a
So
weapon of mass destruction.
as it would
That's all it
be
takes.
to set off a nuclear bomb would be to like microwave sand or something like that. If there exists a technology, the discovery of which could destroy mankind, we really don't have any mechanism of preventing that discovery. We can't put
Yeah.
cats back in the bag as of right now. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there. See if anybody has any
Well,
thoughts.
if the technology becomes that advanced, all it takes is one person that's crazy or has access to that could set it off, and we can all die. And why not a bioweapon or something really simple they can release in a vial and eradicate all of humanity? All it takes is one like mass shooter or whatever that has access to that technology. And eventually, in 1,000 years, 2,000 years, why not? Why would not that not be the case?
Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought up. That yeah, I actually brought up. I didn't allude to Nick Bostrom. Shout out to him. I don't know him. I'm just a guy
Not
in my
personally.
room. No, not personally. Just a guy in my room. But yeah, I alluded to that like in kind of this paradox between how science is amazing and great, and then you have these examples like the nuclear bomb, and you know brought up earlier that a lot of these guys that were developing the bomb were philosophically schooled. They thought about it morally and all these different type of things. But yeah, at the end of the day, scientists just they go on to the next and they go on to the next. Another example, I mean, with CERN and the particle accelerator. I mean, when they were when they were colliding, stuff together. I mean, at some point, they didn't know if they were going to create a black hole that would totally encompass the earth at once, like in an instant, right? So this type of stuff happens a lot more frequently than we think. And there's also plenty of examples of people almost setting off nukes, like the United States government almost nuked North Carolina. I think there's a story of a guy in Russia who it was just his finger that saved us, or he didn't choose. He got a message to send one off, and then his gut instinct told him it was a false alarm, and he just happened to not do it. But I mean, we've been on the brink. We've been on the brink several times, right? So, but yeah, about the point about science outpacing our morality. That kind of brings me to the point of we are not like evolution happens on such a large time scale, and scientific progress and technological progress happens on such a short time scale that evolutionarily we are almost identical to our hunter gatherer forefathers, right? And yet and we're the most adaptable creature the Earth has ever conceived, evolution's ever conceived, on planet Earth at least, and we can adapt incredibly well. But with that being said, with the rate of expansion of technology, we just simply aren't evolved to live in this type of world, right? We're trying to make the best of it. We're trying to do what we can, but
Well,
I
we
mean,
don't know where it's going to take us. So one big technological advancement was the develop like cooking food, like cooking meat. Once we discovered fire and understand that we can cook meat, this increased our caloric intake. It helped us fuel our brains, and it developed evolutionary that we had different brains. So it's very uh, like a kind of technology that influenced our evolutionary path. And I think right now we're having the same thing with things like social media and the internet and all this shit. I think this is something that will affect our brains in the same way cooking meat affected our brains.
right. So let's transition to AI. What's the room? What are y'all's opinion of AI? Is it dangerous? Is there a singularity that once we reach it, there's no turning back? Is it all overblown and the coders can just encode? We can simply unplug it. What are y'all's thoughts here on AI and it becoming our overlords eventually? Andy, we'll hear from Andy.
I have to go. I'll be right back, but I will say that AI, like anything, is potentially dangerous. There is a real possibility for it to go wrong, but it's not necessarily the case that it will, and I don't think it has to if we take the necessary precautions. So that's my real quick word about that.
Good stuff. Skip Lebowski, just squared. What do you think about AI, artificial intelligence?
I definitely think it could be that black ball that I was talking about earlier from the urn.
Right.
Particularly since there is no global kind of cooperation. It's more of a race, and
Right.
we're just kind of stumbling ahead without really talking about global policy, global conventions surrounding the development of general intelligence. And there's also moral and ethical arguments, right? Like if you create a consciousness, is that consciousness then suffering because it can only, manage traffic lights or some shit like that, and its capabilities far exceed jobs and the constraints that we've given it. So yeah, there's existential risks, but there's also, I think, more, I guess, banal moral considerations.
All right, good stuff. What you got, Jimmy? What do you think about AI? Is it overblown or is there some real danger? Real danger lurking. Going once, going twice, Jimmy. All right, Mace. I know you got something. What's up? Mace, where are you? Well,
I'll say my shit real quick. I love Asimov, and I think eventually AI and humans could possibly be best friends and have a great symbiotic relationship. What do you think, ZMO?
oh, I thought. Did you say Asimov, like Isaac Asimov,
Yeah,
like
yeah, Isaac Asimov. I'm a big fan, and I think eventually robots and AI could have a very symbiotic, loving, friendly relationship. I don't think it needs to be in a, we need to have a kind of a apocalyptic view of AI, but I think AI can be actually a conscious entity that has a relationship with humans in a different
right?
way. Like, yeah, like I don't see why not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, uh, many think that we're already cyborgs. I mean, the fact that we carry a phone in our pocket, or most people carry a phone in their pocket at all times. I mean, if this isn't some type of cyborg in a
Yeah,
very crude sense of the
absolutely.
term, you know.
I
So
100% agree with Elon Musk. I remember breaking my phone once recently, and it felt like I lost a body part. Like that was the amount of like it felt like my bodily integrity was compromised. Maybe
Well,
that's
what
me,
about people?
but
What about people with artificial hearts, artificial valves, like prosthetic limbs? Those are far more cyborgs than we'd interpret even phones. Like these people are literal cyborgs.
yeah,
Like
no,
when
that
we
would be way
implant,
more
yeah,
literally a cyborg.
yeah, like when you implant an artificial heart in someone, that is we have cyborgs. Like they exist today. There's machines and humans, and we are working together to keep us alive.
Sorry, guys. I'll be right back. I just wanted to say that.
thanks, Andy. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know how much they've gotten onto the front of like micro technologies or anything like that, like putting a little machine inside your bloodstream. But I don't know where they've gotten with that. But
One of the biggest problems with drugs are like breaking the blood-brain barrier. Drugs have a lot of side effects. Eventually, we can get to the point where we can have like like nanorobots, drug dispensing machines that actually live in the parts of our like body that need these drugs, and can get by the brain barrier, make an analysis when we need those drugs, because oftentimes we don't need them, sometimes we need them. So that robot can dispense certain drugs exactly when we need them, like when we feel pain, and when we don't, it doesn't dispense them. So, like psychiatric medication, opiates, can be dispensed in a very healthy, like analytical way, where, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, I wanted to come back on a point you made because it seems like it's just me and you. But like how you were saying how you think the left sometimes uses science and as a cudgel on to the right, um, and yeah, I think this is. I certainly think it's a perception from the right. I mean, you take something like evolution, and they think they fight it tooth and nail, even though there's more. We know more about evolution than we do about fucking how gravity works, right? So there's more evidence for it, right? Or something like this.
Well, even where we're trying to reach political conclusions, right? So when we understand that vaccines work, vaccines are, they're, it's science, it's efficacious. We should get vaccinated. And when the left kind of expands that to say that we should do something like vaccine mandates, then
Yeah.
we're getting to a point where, to reach that conclusion from the fact of the matter that vaccines are good and they work, it kind of, we're using science as a cudgel, because science doesn't tell us we should have vaccine mandates. That's a completely like apolitical, like moral judgment that's much more subjective, right? It's not as subjective as saying vaccines work. Yes, I can say vaccines work, but to say that we should have mandates that everyone should get vaccinated because there's a greater overall good behind it, then we're making moral implications there. And I'm a moral anti-realist. I think morality is very subjective. I don't think, morality is subjective. So when you start making moral statements, I don't
So you're a
think,
moral relativist?
yeah, and I don't think objective scientific facts can be extrapolated towards moral oughts.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. Take the lockdowns, right? From the scientific fact that and the mathematical fact that if we, at the very beginning, if we stay like we are, if we live life how we are living it currently, then the hospitals will overflow. This will cause all kinds of problems, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to lock down to, stave the curve, right? And then this political action is then maybe is extended and whatever. And then when people question the political action or the moral ought, they will point to the scientific is. Well, don't you know there's this virus out there killing hundreds of thousands of people, and you're anti-scientific, and you're perfectly you hit it right on the nose. They're drawing oughts from the scientific is right, and
And they're
that is
saying, instead, they're
much up
saying
for
that
debate.
they're bad people, right? They're making moral judgment that, if you're against this political thing, you're a bad person because you're also anti-science. So now you're having the psychological kind of influence that a lot of people start becoming anti-scientific, because they're saying, well, this is no longer about uh, you know, something that's objective, something that's rationally founded, something that's becoming very political, and that's, we don't want science to become political, right? We don't want that. That's terrible when that happens.
The more thing, I mean, the more and more things become political every day, and things are ruined because of it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. And to take, arguably the strongest tool that humans have ever known, and then to do that to do, politicize it. I mean, that's a catastrophe, right?
It's unfortunate that I have to go at 7 because I would love to debate the ethics of science and using science for ethics, but maybe next time. I'll catch you guys later.
Well, oh man, I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah.
You got
Sam Harris got a book called The Moral Landscape. I think that would be of interest to any moral relativists out there.
yeah.
No, I've read The Moral Landscape. I have his book.
Well, I mean, honestly, like even Sam himself has said. I think the title of objectivist and realist and anti-realist is it just muddies the waters. It's just like tell me your ideas, and we don't have to put a label on them. Like even Sam has said, I mean, in some way, it could be viewed as moral subjectivity, right? Because as subjectivist morality, because he's not saying there's one way to be moral or to have well-being, which is foundation for morality. He's saying there's multiple ways to get there, right? So in one sense it's subjective, but on the other sense it is relativistic. But he's saying there's peaks that could be of equal good, just like you might think pizza and a hamburger are equally good, even though they're different. They're still just like you might think the experience of doing cocaine and doing some
Sam
other
Harris
drug are the
has an
same.
objective epistemology, but his ontology, in my opinion, there's no way to get around that. His is subjective. Like to even make the claim that well-being is something we should value is necessarily subjective. But where he gets, to get to the facts of the matter, where the goals are objective from your epistemology, then yes, like Sam Harris's epistemology is entirely objective, but his presuppositions are subjective, and those are essential to kind of the ontology of moral values and where morality comes from. And I think those are entire. There's no way to get around a subjective interpretation of morality. I think that's why I'm a moral anti-realist, because I don't even think there's a coherent way to present an objective justification for morality.
Hey, Underjoyed, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What do you think value means?
Value would be a metric based on a
No.
presuppositions.
What value is? Not a value, but what is value?
I just say it's a way to measure something. Like, I mean, do you have a more precise question where I can give a more precise answer?
Okay, so if you say it's a way to measure something, right? And I say that thing doesn't have any value to me, would that just mean to you that that thing has no way to be measured to me?
I think it would just, to say that something has no value to you would just mean the assigned value would be 0, right? So it'd still be like a
No,
measure.
okay, but that doesn't say what the measurement is attached to. It's like saying I've one and then not saying anything else.
Well,
So
I mean, are you saying
in math
meta? I
class,
think
for
one question,
instance,
right?
they would say something about you need to actually put units to what you're talking about. So I'm trying to understand, in your view, what is it that you're trying to say when you talk
for
about
me, value
anything?
would be something like, would a certain crime be worse than another, right? So would stealing a loaf of bread be worse than murdering someone, right? So you can have a value judgment based on a certain moral framework, right? So you
Right,
can
but that
have.
doesn't
Right.
That doesn't actually say what you mean by value. That's what I think is a giant problem in a lot of these conversations, is that people sort of skim over this idea
Well, what's your
of what they
interpretation of
actually
value?
mean by value.
Well, what does value mean to you?
I have a definition. I'm trying
Okay.
to understand yours.
Oh no, what's yours? Then I can maybe better understand how I can respond to your question.
Sure, but once I give it to you, then I won't be able to get yours.
Well, I mean, I can agree with you, disagree with you. I mean,
I mean,
just tell
he's
me what
already.
you.
Yeah, I mean, he's
It's
already
only
given.
polite to tell the person you're going to kill your name first.
So yeah, I think he's tried to answer your question in good faith.
I haven't got any understanding. That's why I keep asking.
Okay. Prod some more then.
I mean, because like I said, if it's a way, if it's a way to measure, then if I use that definition within a situation in which you would use the word value, and that definition doesn't seem to function, then it seems that that definition is not functional. It is incomplete.
Let me
At
help.
this point, I'd ask you to. What I want to know is what your point is, right? So, I think
Okay, I'll tell
so.
you my point.
Right, because in good faith, I want to know what your point is. Then, if I
Sure.
don't understand your point, I want to get your understanding of what the definitions you're using to make your point. So, make your point. Then, if I can't understand it, then maybe I need to clarify the definitions you're using.
Sure. When we're talking about morality, and you talk about good or bad, as part of that, or some kind of value judgment, which is either good or bad or right or wrong. That boils down to the idea of value at the core. And if you're using this idea and you have no solid definition, then it usually, for most people, if they don't have an intuition of something solid for that, then it is an empty idea, and they resolve to subjective kind of morality because they don't have a solid intuition about the idea that's at the core. So I'm trying to understand, if prodded, very clearly, what is this thing at the core of your understanding of morality, which would be, what is the definition to value for you?
I mean, I can give my quick definition of value just off the top.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I mean, to me, a value would be. I don't want to use the word subjective here, but I'm going to have to, I suppose. It would be something that a subject value would be something like something that a subject sees as worthwhile in pursuit, and
Why is it
and normally
worthwhile?
and normally it's a qualitative quality, not a quantitative quality, right? So you're not gonna be able to have a mathematical equation that ends in perfect value, right? But value is a subjective judgment on things you like or dislike, things you think are okay or not okay, good or bad, right?
Okay, but why do you like it or not? Can you prod that idea?
I mean, I think I think at the base of morality is our intuition. I mean, at the end of the day, when people say, why is it bad to murder people, and you can, maybe give them counter examples where it's okay to murder people, or it would be justifiable, or whatever. At the end of the day, most people just say, well, I don't know. I just have a feeling in my gut that having sex with my sister is wrong, right? And there's a thing called moral dumbfounding, actually, where if you say, well, if you have a brother and a sister and they have consensual sex and they both wear a condom and they're both okay with it and they just want to do it one time and they're not going to have a kid, so there's no chance of having having a conscious creature that's harmed or anything like that. What's the problem with it? And a lot of people at the end of the day will say, well, I don't know. I don't really have a logical towards it, but it's just I just don't feel like it's right, and that's something called moral dumbfounding. But yeah, at the bottom of it, it is our intuition about things, right? And I will say our intuitions are very reliable, right?
Right.
More or less. I mean, it's not always, obviously, but by and large.
But you're almost presenting a counterfactual, because when you actually made that argument that when you look into something like incest, like having sex with your sister or whatever, if it has no negative consequence, a lot of people will actually think about that and say, yeah, that actually makes no sense to actually have a problem with that. But when you have certain
I don't believe that statement.
but when you make, like, it's hard to think about a logical argument for, say, justifying something like just torturing a child, like skinning a child alive, because you find skinning a child alive is a fun thing, right? So a lot of people would have a problem with that, but something like incest, like, it seems like you could possibly make a rational argument for why that shouldn't be immoral.
Right, sure. Well, you can make a rational argument for why it should be more, but I'm saying that there's a phenomenon. It has this name called moral dumbfounding, and the reason I pointed that out is because at the end of the day, most people's idea of value and how it pertains to morality is based on intuition, and a lot of this intuition comes from our biological programming, our genes, and a
Well, it
lot
comes
of it,
from empathy in a way, doesn't it?
and the rest comes from the society we were raised in, nature versus nurture, right? Empathy, yeah, empathy
Well,
plays a huge
right.
role, right?
Well,
Yeah.
anytime we think about a certain terrible thing that happens, it seems we always eventually can put ourselves in that situation to find how horrifying we'd be, that if we're a child, something happened to us, we're completely innocent, we'd be abused, we'd be suffering, it would be unjust. So I think empathy goes a long way to understanding why we find certain things immoral, because we understand that if we would suffer under a certain situation, we won't want that thing to happen anywhere else, because if it would happen somewhere else, it might happen to us. So it seems that would be very fundamental to have in a moral, ethical framework. Like, if
So,
something wouldn't have empathy, it would be hard to even create a moral framework.
So
yeah.
I'd like to interject because you've gone down this road a little bit now. You said a term and it actually starts to hit on how I define this kind of concept. A lot of people, if they prod the idea long enough, they'll run into one of a few terms that gets at it. So consequence being an effect. So in morality philosophy, a lot of people probably have heard the term utility or utilitarian, and that's really close to this idea. So the definition I use is, for value is ability to impart effect. Now, any particular place you want to use the word value, that definition functions effectively. And when you pair value with,
Definition, real quick.
say again?
Can you repeat the definition one more time?
Sure, I also put it in live text. Ability to impart effect. So
EFFECT?
yes, effect. Yeah.
Okay.
So an effect is is a consequence, is a stable state. Whereas affect is sort of like between cause and effect. It's It's that changing kind of situation. So, like, the idea of falling is between being in place and then being at some state at the bottom. It's that middle state. So, when you take the idea of good and we break that down, we can break it down to positive value, bad being negative value. So if you put these terms together, good would be a positive ability to impart effect. Or if you want to rearrange it, ability to impart positive effect. And positive, all that means is to posit, to place. So, like putting something on a table, you're adding something. Or negative is to negate, to take away. So taking something off the table. So, for instance, a positive effect would be I give you something. You now have something, and that thing has an ability to impart effect for you. So, like if I give you $5, if I take $5 from you, I have negated in something that is of effective nature to you. So if I cut your arm off, I'm doing the same because your arm is of a positive ability to impart effect.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, like, what if you take away something that's negative, right? Would you consider that giving a positive, like somebody you cure them of their paralysis, so thereby you're giving them the ability to walk again?
Right. So it's sort of like math when you do the whole like doing a negative to a negative.
So I want to. Yeah, I like that. That's very interesting. Yeah, so since we're talking about science and everything, I want to slightly bring it back to that topic, and I want to ask both of you. Really, this is more for you, Underjoyed. But anyways, I mean, I'm not. I don't consider myself a moral realist. I don't really consider myself a moral relative. I think ultimately, it's very difficult to get around the subjectivity, like you said. But at the same time, I think there are reliable ways to make societies miserable, and I think the Sam Harris well-being model is very apropos because any moral system that I've ever heard of has to do fundamentally with the well-being of conscious creatures, right? So heaven and hell existing is just an extension of the pleasure or pain of the well-being or the non-well-being of conscious creatures, right? The evil eye belief in some places where if they look at you when you're not looking, it curses you. It all has to do with the well-being of conscious creatures. So anyways, that being said, I do think we can find science. I do think we can find moral. I don't want to say truths, but we can certainly learn moral lessons from science. And I've said you can get an ought from an is if you add an if, right? And Hume says as much. Hume says you can get an ought from an is if you add another ought, right? So, for example, I learned this the other day, right? So if you have a child and you put on closed captions if they watch a lot of TV or YouTube, and you put on closed captions. That's all you gotta do, and they watch it like normal, the normal amount they would. This will increase your child's ability to read. Like it will double their reading comprehension skills, right? And reading comprehension is linked to many great things, right? Especially one thing that you mentioned, a increase in empathy, right? If you actually have the words articulated in a linear, understand what the person is going through, and etc. So is that not something that, with us knowing that, now obviously I will
Would be
grant
yes. So
now
the
let
reason
me
why,
now
that would have to be subjective because you can make an extrapolation to other thought experiments, such as panpsychists. Like say, it's possibly that there's a degree of consciousness where everything is possibly conscious. Now, For a rock to roll down a hill, could it make a judgment to another rock and say, well, you know what, this was an immoral imposition on your will, or there was an immoral thing that happened that something, some force of nature pushed you down a hill. Now one rock could say, well, that is an immoral thing that happened. And another rock could say, well, no, that is a very moral thing that happened. And the way humans are making moral judgments in terms of valuing certain propositions, like valuing longer lives, education, like even potentially things that make them feel pain. This is a very subjective thing, because anything that would be something that's not a human might have a difficult time understanding what we value. So an alien might value different things and might not understand how we're able to interpret our value system. So yes, we can have objective conclusions towards presuppositions, like if we value suffering as a primacy towards a moral action, we can derive objective facts from that, such as we should do certain things to minimize our suffering. But that can not be, there's in no way I can even comprehend how that could be objective, apart from humans interpreting that value. Like,
Right. But here's two things. If okay, so you have to bridge the is and ought gap, right? So if they say you can't get an ought from an is, but if knowing more about the world, in other words, getting as most ises as you possibly can, the more ises you get, the better ostensibly your oughts will be, right? Because you will just know more, right?
well,
Like,
deriving a not from an is isn't meant to be a challenge. It's meant to be a statement of fact, right? It's meant to be something that this is the fact of the matter. This is our
see,
circumstances, human
I
beings.
see.
It's not meant
I
to be.
disagree
It's
with
not meant
that.
to. Wait, not
I
from an is.
disagree.
It's not meant to be a challenge for theists. There are theists like Christians, all of these like philosophers of theism that say I can derive a not from an is because God is going to bridge that gap. No, Hume makes the statement that deriving a not from an is just a consequence of being a human being that's part of this universe, right? There's no way to do it, right? And that there's certain thought experiments that have this difficult like Girls and completeness theorem has a certain uh, has a similar thing. It's not a challenge to solve it. It's a statement that this can never be solved, right? It's an epistemol
Yeah,
a
yeah.
metaphysical kind of
I'm a.
problem.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that is. I fucking hate it that some dude 200 and something years ago had this sort of snarky line, and ever since then we've been running around with like chickens with our heads cut off, pretending that we that so I would just pose this question. I just fucking hate David Hume for this shit. I think he's brilliant, but I fucking hate it. It gets on my nerves so much. So how would you explain the clear moral arc we've had since the Enlightenment? Which is to say we have derived more and better oughts from more and more accurate ises. I just think if you look at uh, how people, well, I mean, for one, we don't burn people alive anymore because right. Sure, right. Look, let me finish with this real quick. Well, I mean, subjective mean. I mean, okay, so objective would mean without human opinion, right? And it's not really in our opinions to value life over death. I mean, it's just we're biologically wired for it, right? That we humans are not. We are not. We are not. We're not. Sure, but no, I was making an appeal. I was making no. I was making an appeal to the definition of objective, right? Well, I'm not an objective. I don't believe in objective world. Okay.
But
Yeah, I think that's wrong because whatever in whatever space that's going to be occupying, it's going to be in the
well,
in the subconscious realm, and it's going to be because huh because our consciousness is an interaction from objective particles, right? So
right,
so the
but I
fact
can ask you two things that comply to that. So one would be real quick. Is it wrong to let's do the William Lane Craig thing? Is it wrong to torture a child for fun, objectively?
no, I don't think it can be answered objectively.
Right. So I mean, so okay. So my argument would be if you say that, so you can make an objective moral statement. If you're more realist, you should be able to say that it's absolutely objectively wrong to torture a child for fun or an innocent person for fun or skin them alive. And if you're saying yes, it's objectively right, then I would say, is it objectively morally wrong for a rock to roll down a hill? And if you say, well, there's no way to make a moral judgment based on that fact of nature, then I will say, well, yes, it's a fact of nature that human beings do certain terrible things to other human beings, such as murder them, like rape them, like abuse them, like
Well,
do all these things. But these are facts that human beings do. But to say you can have a moral judgment depends entirely on the subject. So the way an alien or some god or anyone else is able to interpret that moral judgment could be completely different in the way that we interpret that, right? So they're facts of the matter, but they're different. The way we interpret them morally has to be subjective. I can't even understand how it could be objective. Like it
so
doesn't even
let me
make
let me
sense
let
to be objective.
okay. So let me ask: do you think the freedom of speech is an objectively good idea for a society to be able to function properly? Do you think some societies can function well, whatever you think that is, without freedom of speech?
Yeah, sure, why not?
How?
I mean, you could have like an artificial intelligence. You could have a matrix that's like for me. You could have You could be in the Matrix, and if everyone was living an optimized, happy life to their full extent, that would be far more beneficial than having freedom, any type of libertarian freedom, freedom of speech, any type of freedom, where we're
I
able
think
to still
generally
suffer.
the lack of freedom of speech is antithetical to a society functioning properly.
Depends what you
I,
value. Like I don't value freedom. I value suffering, pain and suffering. I rather not feel pain and suffering, have a very happy, like not happy, but very content life without suffering, over having
Yeah,
a
freedom
very
isn't an
libertarian
absolute
free life
good.
and experience suffering and suffer and be in pain and have freedom. Like I don't value freedom. I value other things besides freedom.
Freedom is not an absolute good, that's true, but I don't think
Yes.
suppression of
So,
speech
so like
gets us
freedom of
anywhere.
speech, I don't value that. Absolutely not. Like if I can have a better outcome without freedom of speech,
freedom of speech? Well, I'm gonna
yeah,
mute you right now.
if
How
it's
about that?
possible to have a better
I'm
outcome
gonna
without
mute you right
freedom,
now. I'm gonna mute you right now because I don't like what you're saying. How do you like that? Is that fair? Is that good? Can a
sure has
society
nothing to
function
do with
like
it. If
that?
you're gonna do, you can.
You know, there is one observation that I've made that, well, not the first two, but any internet forum that doesn't really have any censorship, any moderation, will tend conservative. And I think that it might be more generally true that a lot of leftist ideas can only exist with censorship.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I can make the same argument about right wing, right? Like, you know, lefties didn't really have a lot of freedom to talk in Nazi Germany, right? So,
Yeah,
but your
like
point,
have you been around in the '80s when people on the right were trying to censor video games, trying to censor violent movies, trying to censor pornography, trying to censor literally fucking everything? Like people on the right were trying to censor absolutely fucking everything. Leftists are the ones that are trying to be more liberal in what we're gonna accept, like violence.
Unless they think something is racist.
Yeah, I mean,
by
right. So
definition,
obviously the
liberals are
right
going to
has
be more
far
liberal,
more
right?
censorship.
The
The right wants far more
pornography,
censorship than the left,
the
right? Obviously.
pornography is going to split hell wide open.
Yeah, I mean the right is the OG.
I just jumped
cancel
in to say
culture.
the Nazis were actually socialists.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh, I just wanted to hop in real quick and say the Nazis were actually right. Thank you, mate.
So I just want to ask, over Underjoy, anybody really, how do you explain the? I mean, we could talk about what metric are you drawing this, but I mean, I think in everyday parlance we can agree that there has been a significant moral arc, and it didn't start during the Dark Ages. It didn't. It started at a very specific time that directly correlates with certain thoughts, certain ideas, right? And we know what those ideas are, right? We talk. So with the increase of technology, with the increase of science, with the increase of the knowledge of the ises, right? How has our quote unquote morality seemed to evolve? And if you say it hasn't, quite frankly, I don't know what you're talking about. Now,
You are a
I'm
child and a product of the environment that stemmed from that frame of thought. And the reason why you value these things are in a very subjective way, that
Right.
because you responded to the culture that created the enlightenment, that you're part of
I
the
want to key
education
in.
system, part of the parental. So this is all subjective.
I
All
want to
these
key in.
factors.
Yeah. I want to key on something specific. And I'll ask ZMO a question. ZMO, do you think it is more evolved not to be torturing people?
more evolved.
Not to be torturing people. or sacrificing children, throwing them into volcanoes?
I mean, yeah, I think it's more
Okay,
morally
exactly.
evolved.
Okay,
Yeah.
there's where we found your problem. You think that it's more evolved to not be throwing children into the volcano.
Yeah, I do.
That is wrong. Like if you think that's objectively true, that's more evolved not to be doing that.
Pangburn.
Well,
I've
you
said
don't really
it
know
before.
that
I'm
that's
not an
not the
objective
case, to
realist.
be fair.
I can tell you exactly what I am. I'm a moral objectivist, subjectivist. Like I think you can have a subjective what you prefer, and then you can make objective judgments. Like if you base something on well-being or
Yes,
health,
of course you can.
value,
Yes,
and then
100%.
you make objective judgments off of that.
That I completely agree with that. Yes.
Okay.
If you
Okay.
pick a
So-
metric,
so
you can
again,
be
Again, but y'all didn't answer my question. How do you explain the moral arc? And again, you claim that it's not a moral arc, whatever. And
that's
quite
the
frankly,
illusion.
Okay, well,
Because you're seeing a moral arc in something where there is no arc. Someone. So from an objective standard, you can say what you need to do, ZMO, is you need to say, look at the moral arc from the perspective of well-being. Of like
okay, that's what I
the
meant
well-being
to say.
of medical
That was
science.
implied,
You have to clarify that, or your conversations about morality will all tank into the toilet. You always have to, and I gotta say this a billion times over as loud as I can, when you're having conversations about morality, make sure you always identify the metric you are using when you're talking about arcs or like more evolved from a perspective of well-being. Yeah.
Yeah, this is why I find it so unhelpful, because in everyday common parlance, if I said, yeah, things about the laws with segregation and equality in the workplace is so much better morally now than 50 years ago. I mean, I know you're going to say this is a philosophical forum, and fair enough, but this is why I find this so unhelpful. It's so obviously better, right? And you could bring up examples of the 1% that thinks it's not better and whatever. But yeah, I mean, sure, that's my
that's not the
objective.
argument. Like that's not the argument. I would say it's better. I would say it's morally correct. It's better, but I'm a moral anti-realist, and the point is that it's not that I wouldn't say it's better or that you don't say it's better. I think we can agree that it's better, but I think this is still entirely subjective, based on our subjective preferences, and to say that something that's subjective is not something that's important or valuable is a complete non sequitur. Like, I mean, we can have subjective moral values, but it can still be very important and in a way we inform our daily lives, right? So the fact that I'm a moral anti-realist doesn't mean I don't find things abhorrent, I don't find things immoral, and I do find certain things moral. I do agree morality exists, but I think morality is subjective. Those two things are still compatible. So
Besides that, I think I want to ask you, Zemo, why do you think that science has made us, or the Enlightenment, or any recent trend? Why do you think that that has made us more moral? What reason do you have to say that?
Well, I forget who had the quote, but those who make you believe can make you atrocities. So once again, when you have facts about the world that are palpably wrong, right? For example, people have eternal souls, and there are witches out there that can corrupt your children's eternal souls. So it is your moral obligation to burn them at the stake or purge them, et cetera, et cetera. We know so much about how the universe works. We have dispelled so many of these poisonous myths that, yeah, I think that's the reason, right? And also the objective growth in wealth. The countries aren't as poor. We're churning out life-saving education. I mean, crime rates have dropped. Global poverty has dropped significantly. I think, And I think it all ties along with science and the scientific method. And the main, like I said, if you believe absurdities, people can make you commit atrocities, right? I mean, yeah. So that'd be my answer.
Well, maybe there might be more people as a result, of modern
Voltaire.
medicine and transportation. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we really are more. You can't say that at any stage, like we've ever been more moral, because there have always been horrendous acts committed by people, always, like
Sure.
throughout all of our
Yeah.
history,
But the objective measurement of those
even today. And there's honestly more there's more opportunities for violence, and more sort of lesser evils as well, when there are more people. So I don't think that there's really a way that you could say that at any stage you'd know what how to generally the best moral character of any area or any time, because you you wouldn't know a lot of the realities of the situation. I mean, of so many humans, and of all the negative that imagine how much more is hidden.
Are you okay? You sound like you're on your deathbed.
Yeah, I'm okay.
That was funny coming from Mace, because sometimes Mace sounds like that, like, well, I don't really know what to do next.
I mean, yeah. I mean, what I'd say to that is, if you look into Steven Pinker and Better Angels document, less war, less famines, by less global poverty, by huge increases. Now, again, this is subjective judgment, right? But yeah. I mean, as much potential. Now, you could say, now there is the argument that we've traded kinetic violence, kinetic injury, kinetic war to potential energy, potential war, which potential devastation, right? So we've traded a bloody battle at Thermopylae with a nuclear reactor that could be deployed 3,000 miles away from its target, right? So we traded it kinetic for potential, right? So that's one way of looking at it. Making the argument against it that all this time of semi-flourishing is going to come to a halt by our own undoing. And that brings us back to the very beginning of the topic of this discussion, right?
So you sort of admitted it yourself, that we will destroy ourselves. That sounds like a moral shortcoming to me.
It's a lot more possible. Sure. It's a lot easier. Yeah, and that's the whole reason I had this discussion. Like, I mean, we have with great power comes great responsibility, and the philosophical, moral underpinnings of and where it's going to take us, where it's going to carry us. Are we going to allow it to get politicized? Are we going to protect the people that need to be protected the most? Or are we going to guard ourselves with pseudoscience? And are we going to embolden the best voices to go forward? I mean, all of these things are important.
I think we're gonna do everything. I think any science that can be made will be attempted to be made unless it's stopped by other people, and we'll just try to explore every route we can. And it's gonna happen quickly. It's already happening quickly, and I think that the most moral solution to it is to enable people to get a little distance between them and others as quickly as possible. I'm gonna argue for some rotating space habitats or some lunar colonization, something that can get us off this big fishbowl thing. Rock.
It's not very hospitable out there. But
Yeah, there will never be another planet that's going to be as hospitable as Earth, and I don't think there's ever going to be a technological reason to go to another planet. If we have the technology to ever send humans to another planet to save ourselves, in my opinion, we'll have the technology to fix it before that.
Well, it's not to save ourselves. It's for the individuals who don't want to be trapped in a fishbowl with all the other people, because it's not exactly human. Like, if you look at history, these ventures will be backed by a group, but it's generally like started by invested individuals who don't want to be involved or don't like they're looking for escape. You have a bunch of people that are looking for escape. And so you give that to them, and it opens up avenues for other cultures, other ideas.
Right, Elon Musk taking a group of people to Mars is literally Jim Jones taking people to Jonestown. He's gonna kill a bunch of people, and they're done. There's
The human race has got
paradise or
to spread
utopia
to
on
other
another
planets.
planet.
We can't survive on Earth indefinitely because one day Earth will be inhabitable.
It'll never be less inhabitable than another planet.
Yes, it will.
No.
Yes,
technically it is possible, I guess.
The sun is going to continue to expand. One day, Earth will be fully engulfed by the sun, and you won't be able to live on Earth then.
Unless we can find a way to prevent the sun from doing that.
What's that, Andy?
I said unless we could prevent a way, or unless we could find a way to prevent the sun from being a problem. But I think a more likely solution would be to just leave Earth and go somewhere else. But yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly in our solar system, there's not many good candidates. But
well, yeah, we would have to terraform. We would have to terraform most likely. We're probably not just going to find a planet that just so happens to be perfect.
I would love to see how human beings are going to look in 4 billion years from now.
Oh man, we're gonna look like aliens. We're not gonna have no muscles. We're gonna have big fucking heads because our frontal cortex will evolve. Something like this.
It's possible we'll look pretty unchanged because we'll make some efforts to make sure we stay the same.
Why would we do that?
Yeah, I just think we're going to do everything.
We like the way that we look right now.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of Andys out there that are anal about the way they look.
Well, I mean,
and they're all going to...
Didn't mean to cut you off. No. Well, I was just gonna say, go ahead.
All right, I was just gonna rant about how people we are a bunch of religious monkeys. We are not going to do the most logical thing ever. We have science and all of these tools, and our cars run on fossil fuels. We have, we've had electricity and solar and wind power, and we've invested hardly any governmental time into getting them. They just kind of came out of our ingenuity naturally. So I think we're going to do everything, and then there's going to be people arbitrarily putting limits on other people here and there. And if we prevent that as much as possible, and we just let people go out and do their thing, we're going to have a diverse ecosystem of cultures that will be healthier than, I don't know, any of the other potential features that I can think of.
Is ZMO there or no?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking this might be a good opportunity if you have any last things you want to do before we switch over to the tavern.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. No, I mean, I think I've said I've asked every question and explored every tract I want to go down. I'll just go down and ask everybody maybe their last thoughts, their last piece on the subject. What is the role of science, ideally, in our society today? Any things you're concerned about, happy about, anything like that? Go for it, Andy.
Me?
Yeah, dude. Your name's Andy.
Oh, right. I would say to maybe be a little bit simple. The role of science is to be scientific, and when something claiming to be science stops being scientific, we need to be very wary of that.
Good one. Next. Lebowski.
Also, I think it would be a very noble cause if scientists started to try and find a way to get rid of all the English people.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other races while we're at it, Andy?
The Canadians.
Oh, okay.
Can we just get
the race
of get rid of all of us right now? Can I off myself? Is that allowed?
No, if the rule will be if you want to die, you are forced to live.
That's the only rule, too.
That's the only rule.
What's worse punishment? What's the worst punishment?
I think the biggest trouble with science right now is the fact that it might be arbitrarily limited where it shouldn't be, because it can provide the solution to problems that we don't even know are coming yet. And if we leave it unfettered, then it will allow us to utilize the tools properly, assuming we have the right people in the right positions. So,
yeah. So you're making the emphasis on the institutions and keeping them pure.
At least with the right goal. Like, if the economy swallows the institutions and everyone's just trying to make money, then they're going to use science to make money.
Right.
Well, we're going to always use science to capitalize. I'm really happy with where scientific consensus is now, as opposed to where it was 50 years ago, or even scarier, 100 years ago, where it was like, yeah, Bob Frank down the street made this concoction, and apparently it can, cure your stomach ailments. So I'm really happy where we are right now with the global scientific consensus. An important thing to point out here is that peer review is not scientific consensus. Peer review gets overturned all the time. This is just a thing I've been echoing as loudly as I can. Like if a journal gets peer reviewed and published, that does not mean it's going to be taught in school. The things that are taught in school, for example, to med students, are things that have successfully survived peer review, have been adopted. The peer review process has now been graduated into the scientific consensus. So I just wanted to outline that because there's a mass global confusion about the process of how things work in the community. We have more checks and balances than most people would ever believe in the scientific community right now, and it's a beautiful thing. All of the knowledge is out there. Everything is shared. Almost everything is shared for free on the internet if people want to learn.
All thanks to the blessing of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Of course, of Latter-day Saints. You don't want to end up in hell. You have to say that Latter-day Saints.
Inshallah.
Joseph Smith was a
Praise
prophet.
Jehovah.
Yeah, and I think we're on a really good track. We need to continue, developing great technologies like we are in medicine, in space travel. I think the amount of inspiration gained from our space travel feats, that is the intangible thing that is hard to measure on a ledger, that people should not forget about. Artistic and scientific inspiration are really important currencies that and we shouldn't simply just look at things through an economic lens.
Underjoyed, you got anything?
Well, science is the best methodology we have to inform our epistemology, and that's pretty much it. But one of the things I really liked is your kind of analysis that, it's potentially that, regardless of our scientific advancement, we might always have religion. And I think that's one of the genius of Asimov, that he actually had a robot that was religious, and that religion is just a kind of part of, the development of a consciousness and mind. And there's a kind of consequence to having this greater understanding, to have a religious, kind of mindset. And certain people are susceptible to that, and we will always be susceptible to that no matter how advanced we get. So eventually we might be able to develop warp drives, travel across the galaxy, but I think religion is something we'll never kind of get around, and it's something we'll always develop, right? Because it's just a construct of the human mind. So our religions in 10,000 years will be very different than what our religions are today.
Yeah, I have to quickly disagree with Underjoyed. I think religions will die out, and they're going to die out very much quicker than people expect in a few generations, I'm thinking. And what I mean by that is not necessarily this idea of having metaphorical structures to inform your ought, or whatever fantasies people might want to create in the artistic realm to call their moral compass or whatever. I'm talking more about religions in the sense that they're attached to a god that exists. I think that is very much dying quickly, and I think our the statistical analysis we have about church attendance and what even what's going on in some of the most extreme parts of the world with young people coming, the young generation now coming into power in places in Saudi Arabia and potentially in North Korea, like in some of these nations where there, and some of it is cult, but in the other is more religious. But I just, I see it dying. I see it dying rapidly, and I think humanity's gonna, be much better off with this hanging over our head.
Yeah, I'll say my final piece, and we'll take it down to the thing. I mean, I'm like somewhere in when I, religion being one episode where Cartman goes to the future, and it's 3 different atheists, AAA something, atheist something with a U, and at the end, it's three different atheists all arguing over what for the atheists over the world. So they're very religious in that sense. So and yeah, the religions, sky, and some of these metaphysical claims that we disbelieve in more and more will die out. But I think a few examples with QAnon and then some of the woke stuff on the other side, we're trading them in for socio-political religions. So yeah, I think we're hardwired for that kind of a thing. But anyways, all right, man. I appreciate y'all.
Awesome
I really
stuff,
do.
Zemo.
And that's all I got.
Awesome stuff, Zemo. Really enjoyed the show. Let's head over to the tavern, y'all.
All right, y'all.
Anyone who stops by and does see this conversation, remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and join us on Discord. The link is in the description of this video.
Mm-hmm.